Welcome to the Rent to Rent Success podcast, the only podcast entirely dedicated to helping you achieve rent to rent success. We talk about the ethical way to get you started in property without buying it. This is our place to inspire each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. Property investors and sisters Stephanie and Nicky Taylor are your guides on this exciting ride. Let's start up the engines and get ready to fly. Hello. Stephanie here. Welcome aboard episode 51 of the Rent to Rent Success podcast. And today we're talking about our businesses in 2020. In this part 3 episode, I'm going to talk about the businesses where we're buying properties. And we usually talk about rent to rent on here and interview other people about their businesses. So I wondered whether you'd enjoy this new series where we're talking about our businesses. And I have to say that the response from the previous couple of episodes where I've talked about it has been amazing. Thank you so much for all your messages and all your questions. If you're listening to this episode as it goes live and it's before the 21st of December in 2021, then you might be in with a chance. If you'd love to get started in rent to rent this year, if you'd love to have certainty about each step to take, if you'd love to have ongoing support as you implement the rent to rent success system, then we'd love to invite you to join us in the Rent to Rent Kickstarter program. And now is a great time because you can join us at the current price, which is exceptional value. As from the 21st of January at midnight, the price will go up significantly. So if you do want to join us to get your first deal now, if you've been hesitating, waiting, sitting on the fence, then now is the time to get started. There's more information at renttorentssuccess.com/last chance. That's renttorent.com/last chance. So let's dive into today. I need to give my disclaimer again before we talk business. I'm not trying to say that our experience is super extraordinary. I know that to some people it's very little and to other people it's a lot. But the reason I love to talk about it is that I want people to know what is possible. Even for people like me who didn't know about property, who didn't know about all the simple steps to build wealth that were always open to me, but I just did not know that they were there. And property is transformational, and more people should know that it is open to everyone who wants it. And you can improve your life massively in a year, starting from nothing, and utterly transform it within 5 years when you go all in. And of course, I did all of this with my sister and business partner, Nicky. And you can meet Nicky if you haven't already in episode 30 at renttorentsuccess.com/30 or episode 30 in your podcast app. So let me give you an overview to start off with. If you're just joining us for the very first time and you have no idea what these businesses are, we've got 3 parts to our businesses. The first is our rent to rent HMO management business. That's a house share management business called HMO Heaven. And we've got our rent to rent training company, Rent to Rent Success. And we've also got our portfolio of properties that we own across a number of different limited companies. And I talked about HMO Heaven and Rent to Rent Success in episode 49. And I talked about our 4-flat conversion on an exchange with delayed completion in episode 50. So here today, I'm talking about another of the properties we bought, and it's all about the magic of multi-unit blocks. So let's go. I haven't talked about this one on the podcast before, and it's been an interesting one, full of challenges and bursting with opportunity. We completed on this property on the 11th of March, 2019. So we've had it for coming up to 2 years. And it was, because I'm speaking now in January 2021. So it was a conventional purchase with a deposit and commercial finance. A family friend helped us fund the deposit by loaning us £50,000. And we used profit from our business and savings to make up the remainder of the deposit, which was £59,500. And the purchase price overall was £375,500. And we'll have these in the show notes too. Sometimes it's easier when you've got the stuff written down. So that's renttoRentsuccess.com/51 for this episode. And so this property is a 12 units. It's a mixed use property. That means it's commercial and residential. It's made up of a 2-bed flat and 10 almost studio flats and a small commercial unit, i.e. shop. So we seem to have a thing for these almost studios, don't we? In episode 50, I talked about the almost studios in our 4-flat conversion. And the almost studios in this property are different though. Each of the 10 almost studio units in the 12-unit property, they've got one open plan room, which is kitchen, lounge, bedroom. And then they've got 3 separate shared bathrooms and shower rooms and 4 toilets. So there's 10 rooms sharing 3 shower rooms plus a toilet. 3 shower rooms and 4 toilets, I should say. So it's an unusual arrangement, and we wondered whether it would work. When we first bought the property, we did have the idea of adding en suites to each unit, but for various reasons, that doesn't make sense to do that. So I want to talk about some of the challenges that we had with this one. And the biggest challenge with this purchase was securing the funding. Getting commercial finance as a beginner, it can be protracted, it can be costly. Commercial lenders are rigorous in their assessment process to ascertain your creditworthiness and to test that you have credible and proven track record and experience. I think the only question they didn't ask me was what I had for dinner the night before. Our top tip here is get a great broker. A broker that has previously brokered deals for the type of purchase you are doing, and one who has access to the whole of the market. A good broker will be able to guide you through the process and ensure that you get the best deal and rates for your circumstance. And the intangible is that the broker will have a relationship. You need a broker who has a relationship of trust with a lender, the broker's going to ask you the right question so that they can present you to the lender in the way that's most effective. Because the story of your experience and who you are as a person, as a business owner, actually really does come into it. It's not just about the figures. It is really about you and how your broker is able to paint that picture on your behalf. So it's important to have a good broker. So I'm going to describe what the property was like and what was left to do when we bought it. So the property is a Grade 2 listed building. It's in a conservation area, and we purchased it with 8 sitting tenants. The 10 almost studio flats are heated by one combination boiler, and they share the same gas and water supplies. The units had their own individual electric supplies. We had a leaking roof, leaking windows, a leaking boiler, and a leaking bath, and a leaking bath and shower. So a lot of leakiness going on. And the units were in various states of repair. As well, we had some empty units were in particularly bad state of repair. So a full refurb, basically, roofing and guttering repairs, wooden sash and casement window repairs and replacing rotten floor joists, upgrading the plumbing and electrics, upgrading the fire detection and protection systems, installing new stud walls to create a laundry facility, stripping out existing kitchens and baths and shower rooms and replacing with new, and redecorating and laying laminate flooring throughout. And we did actually furnish these ones as well. And you'll be able to see on HMO Heaven website on the case studies page, we've got some of the Stow Hill Studios, which is the property I'm talking about here. And you'll be able to see some pictures before and after. It's quite impressive. Well, it's quite a big transformation. And we'll put some links in the show notes so that you can just have a look. So let me talk about how much does all this cost. So we've talked about the cost of actually buying the property, but let's talk about the refurbishment. The refurbishment of this property is ongoing. We've immediately completed the fire and the health and the safety issues that we talked about. And we've also now done 5 of the 10 almost studios. The other ones are tenanted. So the ones that were empty when we bought it, we've done. Any that have become empty since we've had it, we've done. We've also done the 2-bed flat and the shower rooms and the laundry facility. So we're going to work through the rest of the property as tenants move on, or with their agreement with them in situ, we're going to develop those other parts of the property. So we're on track, and we've spent £90,000 of our budgeted £157,000 budget. So I'm going to put the breakdown on the website, but just to round it up. Roof and windows, £13,000. Building, £58,000. Electrics, £8,000. Plumbing, £8,000. Dressing, £2,000. So let's talk about the challenges of the refurb. This is Nicky T's give me this info. It's the property is the building that keeps on giving. It's a gift in so many ways. As we've progressed through the refurbishment, we've discovered even a significant amount of botched repairs and works, and that has increased the time. I think this is par for the course for any refurbishment. It's things that you don't know until you start work. An example being taking out the bath to create a shower and laundry room, revealing that the bath waste was leaking, the floor joists spanning 2 of the shower rooms were rotten and needed to be replaced. Or discovering, another thing that we discovered was that the drops on the existing plumbing runs were insufficient, and often they were running backwards, causing regular blockages in the system as the waste and dirty water couldn't run away. So every job just became bigger and more stressful and more costly. Not more stressful to me, but Nicky was managing all of that. And if you have the long view, it doesn't feel stressful, because we're going to own this property for 10 years, 20 years, or beyond that. We're going to own it in trust and pass it on. So we know that anything we do now, it's not going to be expensive. It's not going to be stressful in terms of the big picture and what our vision is. So here are the numbers for this deal. So we've got the purchase price, and I'll put these in the show notes as well. 375,500. Stamp duty and completion fees, etc., 12,000. Then we've got the refurb so far, 92,000. And we've got another 65,000 allowed in there to budget for, continued works. So by the end of it, we will have spent 544,000. Annual rent is 64,800. And so it's still a phenomenal purchase. Our valuations, when we bought it, we were so lucky, because when we bought it, we had agreed with the seller that we would buy it at £375,000. And we were worried because, as many of you will know who are investors, when you go to the mortgage lender, they want to be very conservative about the valuation they're giving for a property, because they want to leave themselves comfortable. If they need to sell that property in a hurry, they don't want to have given you a sky high valuation that makes it difficult for them to recover their money if you can't pay them back. So they're always going conservative. And what we've been finding on some other purchases that we tried to make is that it was all falling through when the lender came back with a lower valuation than the price that we'd been willing to pay. And we were so worried that that would happen in this instance. And we really wanted this property. But what happened was we agreed 375, but to our amazement, shock, and delight, the commercial lenders who valued it, they valued it at £500,000 on a 90-day. They give you different valuations depending whether they're selling it fast, or selling it on a 30-day, that's considered fast, or a 60-day, or a 90-day. And their valuation on selling at a 90-day, which would be a typical sale, was £500,000. So that was over £125,000 more than what we were buying it for before we'd done any refurbishment. So that gave us a lot of satisfaction. And we've had an informal, not an official lender valuation at £600,000 in November 2020, so just a few months ago. And we feel pretty confident that when we get to the end, that it's going to be the valuation is going to be way beyond that. We think ballpark 700,000. So we'll see, or even beyond, because we know that even though we're likely to see some shake in the marketplace and perhaps a reduction in house prices, we think that any dip in house prices where we are in Newport in South Wales is going to be small compared with places in like London where the prices have been so high and so hot and so inflated. Whereas here, some parts are only just coming back to pre-2008 levels. So we're just coming back. There hasn't been that equity, there hasn't been that capital growth where we are. And we're just starting to see the beginnings of that. And so I think here, the recession will be more, in terms of house prices, will be more of a plateau rather than a dip. And I even think that prices here will continue to rise slowly, even in spite of having a slowdown in the market, which is anticipated for this year. If you want to find out more about the rent-to-rent success system and the ethical way to get started in property without buying it, you'll love the Rent-to-Rent Success book. It's your roadmap to property profit and the freedom to live life on your terms. Get the Rent-to-Rent Success book at renttoRentSuccessbook.com. That's rentsuccessbook.com. Now let's pick up today's show. So the question I then get is, well, how did you find this deal? And people, even me, I ask people as well, how did you find this? How did you find it? But we just found it because we're local. We saw it. We saw it on Rightmove. We saw it, in front of us. I think when you're local to where you're investing, or when you know the area really well that you're investing in, you don't necessarily need to live there. But when you know the area well, you just know what will work. And that's such a bonus. You know the people involved. We know some of the agents and so on. So it's just really helpful being local. So let me tell you about why I'm excited. Why am I talking about the magic of multi-unit blocks? What is so special about multi-unit blocks as a property strategy for 2020? First of all, the first thing is that we bought that for 375. So each unit then, if you average it and just split them equally, is £32,000, which is phenomenal value. And we've chosen to invest quite a bit in doing the properties up. But even had we not chosen to do that, it would still have been a great cash flowing property. So let me go through. There are so many reasons I love multi-unit blocks. Let me count the ways. As I say, we fell into this strategy by accident because we were trying to buy much smaller properties. And things kept falling through because a lot of people want to buy HMOs. And what we found was in buying this property is that very few people want to buy multi-unit blocks. And even fewer people are interested if some of those units are commercial units, even if, as in this case, is only one commercial unit. And of the few who are interested, even fewer meet the requirements for commercial funding. So all of this means that your per unit prices are lower. Like that's what I was just talking about. So we're paying £32,000 per unit, and each unit is bringing in between £450 and £600 in rent. So for a unit that's costing 32 grand, the rent is, as I say, 450 to 600. And even in the valleys of Wales, we're in South Wales in a city, Newport, and even in the valleys of Wales, you're talking 60 odd and beyond to achieve that rent of around 450. And so that's the first thing. Your per unit prices are lower. The next thing is competition is lower because everybody and his dog is buying single properties or buy-to-lets or HMOs. Not as many people are looking for multi-unit blocks. A far, far smaller percentage. So there's less competition. And The next bonus is that sellers are more likely to be interested in a creative strategy which gives them certainty. Because when you're selling a multi-unit block all on one title, the deal can so easily fall out of bed. As we talked about before, lenders can downvalue it. When the lender values it at less than the price that the seller wants to sell at, sometimes that makes the deal fall out of bed. The other way that the deals can fall out of bed a lot is that a seller can have their property on, the buyer can be really keen, but for whatever reason, the mortgage lender does not like either something to do with the property, something to do with the buyer. It can be so lengthy and protracted for a seller to sell their property on the open market when it's one of these bigger multi-unit block properties. So what happens is sellers are much more likely to want to do a creative strategy. And the creative strategies are fantastic for property investors because what they mean is you don't necessarily have to get a big mortgage. When you take a lender out of it, you've got a lot more flexibility. And you also often don't need a big deposit. The seller will come to an arrangement with you by which you agree a purchase price with them and you agree on a date in the future to complete the purchase, which gives you time in the meantime to take control of the property. For example, refurbish the property, get a higher valuation, take out your lending, etc. Because lenders do not have a good imagination. They like to be extremely cautious. So if you're showing them a property that looks ramshackle and run down, that is how they're going to value it. Even though you're saying you're going to refurbish it, they're not going to give you that. They're not going to confirm a higher valuation, or they're not going to want to lend you at a higher price than what they can see in front of them. So having that creativity that the sellers are much more likely to be able to give you on a commercial property just gives you a lot more flexibility. And these multi-unit blocks, they keep on giving because you can save on your conversion costs. Because you're buying the property, it's already converted. You don't have the cost of implementing building regs such as soundproofing and other conversions that are particularly expensive to do. Of course, you want to improve the property that you have and make it as soundproof as possible, but you don't have to do things that you would do if you were making the conversion when you buy a converted property. So the next thing is economies of scale. All your costs are lower. We talked about unit cost already. The cost of buying a 12-unit property is substantially lower than the cost of buying 12 equivalent separate properties. So if I break it down and say, for example, the £375,500 that we paid is under £32,000 per unit, with rental incomes of between £450 and £600 per month, so it's up to £7,200 per year. And a property offering 400 to 600 in rental income per month is likely to cost, I said earlier, 60,000, but more likely 70,000. So you can see it's almost a 50% discount. I mean, that is music to the ears of property investors. Rather than buying 12 properties at 70 grand each, you can get 12 units in one property at 32 grand each. So the next thing is you're more likely to significantly increase the value in a short period of time with one of these multi-unit blocks, especially when it's part commercial. The reason is that when lenders value multi-unit blocks, they'll account for rental income in their valuation. And therefore, when you increase the rental income of a property, you increase the value of it too. And that link is much, much stronger than it is for residential buy-to-let property. So this comes to the fore when buying down at heel properties. Because when you're buying a down at heel property like we did, the rental income on each of those 10 almost studios that I mentioned was £260 a month each. And post refurb, we're renting them out at £450 each. And they go like hotcakes. They are so popular. So that alone, we know that when we come to have it formally valued, will boost up the valuation. And I can't wait to review this property again in another year, and we'll be able to talk to you about that reval. Next reason I love the multi-unit blocks is that title splitting bonus. Because when you buy multi-unit blocks all on one title, there are lots of different ways to add value. And one is that you can split the title so that you can sell the units individually. Now, it may not that may not be relevant in this case because people are sharing bathrooms in some of the units we had. But for example, we could potentially split off the title for the shop and for the 2-bedroom flat and sell those separately, and then have the 10 that's sharing the bathroom as a separate one. But typically, when you buy a multi-unit block, you have that option that you're able to split the titles. And when you're able to split the titles, you're able to sell those £32,000 units for closer to, 50, 60, 70 when you're selling one at a time rather than in bulk, if you will. So there are so many cherries on the multi-block cake. I hope you're enjoying this. Have you thought of multi-unit blocks? So people, when I talk about this, they say, well, how can I do this? How can I get started in multi-unit blocks? And what about if I'm a beginner? So obviously the obvious way is to look for multi-unit blocks already converted on one title. And depending on your experience levels and your risk appetite, you choose the number of units that you want to go for. I actually talked about this on a podcast that I love recently, and it's all about how beginners can start in multi-unit blocks. And it was on the Wealth Talks podcast. It's a podcast I love. It's run by 2 guys I hugely admire. It's Christian Rodwell and Kevin Whelan. It's a fantastic guide, and it's a fast track to building that long-term wealth. And I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can listen in. I think at the beginning, I'd never have had the confidence to think that I could buy a 12-unit property. When we were starting out in 2016, that would have just seemed too absurdly ridiculous. So I'd never thought that we could buy a 12-unit property, attract private finance, and succeed in securing traditional commercial lending finance. It has been amazing what's happened for us since we started in rent to rent. And even though I was nervous to take that first step, I was confident that we could manage a property with care, because so many people were doing it in a careless way, in a shoddy way. And I thought that simply by adding care, it would make all the difference. And it did. If you'd like to start your property journey and join us in Kickstarter and get your year off to a flying start, then go over to renttorentsuccess.com/last chance. It's your last chance to join us in Rent to Rent Kickstarter before prices go up at midnight on the 21st of January. If you know it's your time, we would love to see you there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode talking about one of my favorites, multi-unit blocks. And we've got another episode next time, which will be on another of our properties. So until next week, have a great rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, and be a game changer. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the links for anything mentioned in today's episode, or if voice is not enough and you want to see us on video too, you can find all the show notes and lots more at renttorentsuccess.com. That's rent number 2, rentsuccess.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd super appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to review it in your podcast app. Remember, we'll be donating to our B1G1 charities too for each review you give. Until then, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer.